Welcome to the Disruptor Network podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Disruptors Network. Today we have Jennifer Grimson, who was a single mother who lost everything twice, but the second time she rebuilt herself by creating small empires to create financial independence. With just a W-2 and grit, she built a $1.4 million real estate investment and income producing portfolio. And in 2020, she built the Micro Empire podcast in order to pull back the curtain on what it really means to take the path to financial success. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Jennifer Grimson.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Welcome back to the Disruptors Network, and I have Jenn Grimson here. And I gave you a warm intro, but I don't think I could justify your story on my own. And your story for me has been amazing, just listening to you, because I think a lot of people can relate to it, of just how you really started from nothing again. And I've started over a few times in my life. And you built it into financial freedom, and now you have a podcast and you're telling everybody, so welcome, and I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great. So, and let me ask you a question, Jennifer. The podcast, which is Micro Empires, did you start this specifically to kind of just get your story out there? Was that the mission around it?
To some degree. That's hard to answer, right? So my story is such a small part of it, but part of what happened in my life was people kept saying, how did you do this? How did you do this? And I kept repeating the same story over and over again. But I also had kept a lot of what I'd gone through a secret because I had so much shame around it, losing everything twice. And I decided that if I was really going to share how I did this, I really had to share where I started from, because from the outside looking in, like many of us on social media, my life probably looked pretty perfect. And it was really not perfect. So I decided to share that. But what really drove me to do it was that I rebuilt in a short period of time using tools that I had. I had a W-2 and some grit and some knowledge from some real estate investors. And I was kind of angry, like, how did I not know that I had all these tools? And I'm smart, right? I didn't know I could borrow against my 401k. I didn't know I could buy real estate with an old 401k. I didn't know a lot of things. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to keep going on this path, and I might as well record while I'm going everybody I've already talked to, everybody I'm going to talk to, because I'm not at that financial freedom place. And well, I'm not quite there. I probably am if I really did the numbers, but I never intend to stop. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm going to keep building and growing and doing generational wealth and helping other people get the same.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think I took a bunch of things from your story, but early in your career, when you went to your first divorce and he continued to sue you over and over again, you had to declare bankruptcy twice to stop it, which is insane. Mm-hmm. You say something at some point that you were paying between $10,000 and $15,000 a month in legal fees. And it almost seemed from your tone, and you can stop me if I'm wrong, that you had gotten used to that. Like, this was just your reality that you were paying that every single month. Like, what was that like that process and getting yourself out of that process? I think we get used to anything, but what was your process with that?
Yeah, it's anything but normal, but it's amazing what we can get used to. It was just, it was relentless. I can't tell you how terrible it was. And it was, I guess, probably the thing that was worse for me or for anybody probably watching was none of that was necessary, right? So it's not like I had an illness or a child who I needed to get $10,000 to $15,000 a month for medication or surgeries or whatever. All of this was about, basically being punitive through the court system, which people can do. And all I could do at the time was keep working, putting one foot in front of the other. At the time I had moved back home up to New England, Boston. I was kind of working there as a sales executive. And I just outperformed. I just kept selling and selling and selling as much as I could. And at the time, all I believed was all I could do was just keep working and paying. And thank God I was able to obtain a 6-figure job, because I would not have been able to survive that at all. And I had the support of my family. But that is not normal. Yeah. And the bankruptcy thing really didn't enter my mind the first time. until I realized that it would stop the lawsuits more than anything. So that's because I declared Chapter 13 bankruptcy twice. So you talk about ruining your credit, kind of forever.
You had no choice. And what I think is the most powerful thing about your story, is I think women get into bad relationships, and men too. But you find it more in single women and single moms that get into relationships and they feel like they have no out. And like, how am I going to make money? I haven't been working, and how do I start over at 40? And how do I? And I think that's probably a pretty common problem. And I'm sure you hear it all the time now because you're empowering people with it. But it's like people feel like they have no way out. I mean, in your brain, how did you will yourself to that? Like, I'm just going to go back to working. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get myself some credit cards. Like, you did some amazing you got over some amazing obstacles. Like, what mindset did you use to even get there? Because most people think they can't.
Yeah. And that's such a good point. And so I talk to people about their money every single day. And I remind folks that it doesn't matter how you got there, right? So some people end up in the circumstance I am because they overspent or they invested wrong or they trusted a buddy. My mistakes were relational. All of them were relational because I am a very frugal person and I've always been very budget conscious. So that wasn't what got me there. It was having an ex-husband who sued me. But the second time was because I had turned my financial well-being over to someone else, which is very common. You're right. So, and it's a long story. Anybody wants to hear it, I share it all on the show. But at the end, I woke up, basically one day and found myself at the end of a relationship and faced with the fact that I was living in a house that didn't have my name on it. I was driving a car that didn't have my name on it. I didn't have an income. I didn't have savings. And I didn't have any place to go. And I had 2 kids. And again, I had to rely on my family who stepped in. My sister, we moved in with my sister for 4 months. I'm sure for her, it was like 4 months, 6 days, 3 hours and 29 seconds. But they were kind enough to take us in. And I can't underplay that enough because many people don't have a support network like that. But what I did have was, I'll tell you one thing, I am driven by, I just knew that I was going to get back on my feet and I was going to survive. Now I did have the second time it happened, I was 41 and I did have the knowledge that I had the experience to get a 6-figure job. So I had to go back to my network. I can't underscore the network, importance enough either. And because you can't get a job unless you know somebody, a meaningful, good job. You're not going to find it on monster.com or whatever people are doing right now. It's all about networking and who you know. So that's what I did. And then I just knew that I could follow steps that would get me to a place. So I landed a job but getting a place to live, I couldn't fill out a credit application. I couldn't qualify for a 500 square foot studio, let alone I needed a 3-bedroom. So, I'll just tell you about that because you're a mortgage guy and a real estate guy and I'm in real estate. I just found somebody who was renting a house, like just a guy, like not a management company. And I went and I met with him. I showed up with my paychecks. I showed up with my bank account because I was earning money and I had money in the bank, but I had terrible credit. And he was like, all right, I'll take a chance. And that's what it takes. It takes a lot of door knocking and get someone to do that for you.
You need some luck too. But I mean, even looking for a job at 41 that was in the 6 figures is not easy in this market. No. So you're right about the network too. Like, I really truly believe who you know is super important. And you have to continue to grow that over time. Like, that's something that is never enough. Like, you always have to continue to grow your network. So that's a great point that you made for sure. But still, that was a hurdle to get over, right? That you had to do that again. And then I know you started with one home that was your primary residence, which you like jumped into some hoops to buy. And I understand. When I heard you, I listened to your story about how you bought the house. I know what that is. You got to get one mortgage person that's willing to really get into the nitty gritty of your file and talk it through and walk it through to get it done. And then how did you turn that one house that was your first house into multiple houses?
So the game changer was Airbnb. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, so that's one of the hottest markets now. So when I bought that first house, though, you're right. The guy I called up late on a Friday night, and I just said, "You're my guy," and he was, and he made it happen, and it was a miracle. But I had to sell everything to put down because I was not going to get a 3% loan or a 5% loan. I had that house in, I think it was 2013, and then I heard about Airbnb in 2014, and I had always had multiple streams of income. I always say I have 3 streams. So I am also a painter. So I had started painting and I was selling my paintings. I was still doing consulting on LinkedIn, and I had my full-time job. But I knew this house that I bought, I was like, there's got to be a way for me to use this house. I had a friend move in. She was paying me a little bit of rent. I heard about Airbnb and I remember writing it down. I think I still have the card that has the note on it. I was like, what's that? And I came home and looked at it. And I was like, all right, I did the math. And I thought, if I can rent this house like 7 nights a month, I can cover my mortgage. So I went to my
early, by the way. You were so early. 2014 was very early. So it was good insight.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, in this market where it's exploded, but the city has also done so much regulations. And if my short-term rental story is interesting and it's evolving to this day, but I will tell you about that. So I went to my roommate, my dear friend, and I said, I love you. You got to go. And we're still friends to this day, but I was like, this is just my opportunity. And so anyway, got her out, converted the house, put it on Airbnb. Like at first I was like, I'll just do weekends. I booked up weekends for 3 months straight. I was doing the cleaning myself and handling it myself. Bad idea. And then within like 3 or 4 months, I realized that number one, I had kind of made myself homeless again because I had to sleep on people's couches and go, hang out with my mom a lot. It also started dating my husband at that point. So he was like, are you living at your mom's house right now? But I just realized I needed another house. And by that point, I had joined the real estate investors group here in Nashville, which is critical to anybody who wants to. You got to get around people who, I call it get in the pool. You got to get in the pool. I jumped in the pool. Everybody was an Olympic swimmer and I'm floating with floaties on, trying to keep up. But if you float long enough, you'll learn and they will help you. And that's what happened. So I really didn't know I could buy a house for 3% down or 5% down if you have good credit. It's amazing what good credit does for you.
Yeah.
So I started looking for another house. And the other big factor was I learned that I could borrow against my 401k, not take out from, not cash out, borrow. So I went to my employer's 401k handler and I was allowed to borrow $22,000. I borrowed that. I bought a house. I moved in with my dog and a suitcase and an air mattress. I set it up on Airbnb. I got it rolling. I repaid the money. I borrowed the same $22,000. I bought a house. I moved in with my dog and my air mattress. And so I did that over and over again as I kept moving. Now, what happened here at Nashville was interesting. The market started to go up. The city started to explode as a real tourist place, and people got wind of Airbnb. I remember telling my real estate investor friends, I can't tell you how lucrative this is. And they were like, what? That doesn't make sense. None of that makes sense. I'm like, really? Because we're talking $15,000 a month gross on one property. So and I share my numbers. I don't keep it a secret. But the city started to crack down the neighborhoods, all these regulations came in, all of this difficulty came in, and then competition came in. So I kept going, still had my job. I decided to leave my corporate job in 2018 because I was doing other investments, still had the Airbnbs. But in 2019, I saw my profits start to go down. They were still doing better than a long-term rental, but there was it's a high touch, high overhead industry. So if you're not in it, you need to know that. And I was competing now with rooftop bars and jacuzzis and, bachelorette havens. And I just had these little houses. So 30 days before COVID hit, I sold them here in Nashville. And now you could argue that may have been a mistake because that was only a year ago, really a year and a half. But the way I am wired, my money culture, I like to call it, if I had gone into COVID carrying $7,000 in mortgages, I would have been miserable and terrified. And my husband would be running for his life. He would just hate living with me. So it was the right decision for me. And I just kind of wanted to sit and wait, because despite what I've done with my own financial journey, I'm not a big risk taker. I take small risks. That's why I call it micro empires. So
me and you are opposite. I turned a lot of my long-term renters into Airbnb in the last 12 months, but not. So a couple of things. I mean, you were really in a market that exploded before it exploded. So like, kudos to you on that. You bought. The biggest thing I could say out of that is that you may have sold before COVID, but you did great on your properties because the appreciation over the time you held them. So that was amazing. Like, having the foresight to buy in that market is an accomplishment. I went very Airbnb heavy over the last 12 months. In markets that I could buy in that weren't overrun by Airbnb though. So I was looking for niche markets, and I found some that are markets that aren't overrun by Airbnb, and that aren't overly regulated. So the two things you said were obstacles, I completely agree with you on. I think for people that are looking to get into it, those are the two biggest obstacles. Are there a million Airbnb properties in that area? One, and two, what are the restrictions in the area for Airbnb? Because it's not always Airbnb friendly. So I think the two things you hit on were on the money. Like, if you're looking to invest in that, like, those are the two things you should ask it first. So I went that way, and it's been great. But I think the other thing that you talked about, and I'd like to hear this from you also, is that I think that you have to have an exit strategy with it, because it may not work forever. So like, did you have a planned exit strategy, or are you just like at some point like, this is it, I'm getting out?
Yeah, because of my financial situation, I bought in evolving neighborhoods, which I'm always very interested. Where I live right now is still an evolving neighborhood, and it's actually only 6 blocks from the first house I ever bought. Okay. But yes, so I bought in an evolving area and for low cost, but there's a cost of living there. There are areas that I wouldn't have moved to if my kids had been little. So that was number one. So, I mean, we talk about that a lot, right? You make your real estate and you make your money in the beginning. So buy low, of course, who doesn't want to buy low? But yes, I had several exit strategies, renting them out, selling them. I didn't, however, take full advantage of all the things I know now, because one of the things I started to do was to invest in multifamily. And that's when I learned about cost segregation, which you can absolutely apply to your Airbnb properties. But I wanted to tell you something that has literally just come up in the last week. So I have shifted, and I'm very heavily involved in multifamily. But at the same time, I'm like, that's great, but I need more cash flow. So I started to revisit the short-term rental thing. And just like you've done, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to do it different. I'm not going to go where people are going to tell me what to do. I can't stand to be told what to do. I don't think any of us as investors in real, like good luck, right? So I'm going to find markets that are friendly, and I'm going to buy. The number one thing for me, as far as a strategy, is I have to buy at a number that doesn't make me stay up at night. So there may be $1 million house, but if that's not right for me, then I'm going to start at the $400,000 or the $300,000 house and just get my foot in the door and learn it. There's a lot of FOMO, like you got to do it now. You got to do it now. There's always an opportunity. I'll just tell you, I went to the Smoky Mountains last week and spent 5 days straight looking at places. And I found a cabin. I went to see it. Sort of your classic example of somebody who doesn't really know anything about it, has just been living there. And while I was there, he was like, by the way, I have a bunch of land. Do you want to buy that too? And I said, yes, sir. I would like to buy that too.
Yeah, I'm going to go all in. Yeah. Maybe I was meant to speak to you today for a couple of different things. So I'm actually looking at a property right now for Airbnb purposes that's over $1 million. And I'm kind of very torn about it in my brain, because it's tough. And it's like you said, like it's it's a big number, you know, and if the strategy stops working and they put restrictions on it, then what is my exit plan? So that's kind of what I'm working on now. So maybe we were meant to speak today, but you brought something up that I think is really, really important that I want the people to hear is, can you explain cost segregation to the audience?
I could try, but
okay. I can do it.
Yeah. My favorite human is in New Jersey about cost segregation. So that's my go-to guy. Cost segregation simply is about where you take an asset and you segregate, you know, what's inside of that asset. I'm really not going to do this justice.
Well, that's right. That's the general concept of it for sure.
Right. And I think most of us are aware of it because we understand depreciation and we understand, okay, there's this 27-year depreciation. But what it does is it separates the asset from kind of all of the, I don't know how to say it, like air conditioning units and everything else that's included in the asset. And by depreciating that part, you get incredible tax benefits. But the big changer was when bonus depreciation came into play, which meant that you did not have to wait your 27 years to take all the depreciation. That was a reason why people held properties for long periods of time, because they're like, well, I'm still getting a depreciation. I'm still getting a tax break. Wait till I get this, you know, all this tax break. Bonus depreciation allowed you to take the entire tax break in the first year if you needed it. And so we had an apartment complex. We did a cost segregation on it. It came in with $350,000 of tax shelter. We didn't need them all in the first year. We did 1, 2, 3 years, and then we sold and we roll it into something else. What I didn't do with my other properties, which I didn't know about, was, and I will be doing this in the future, you could do that with single family homes that are investment properties.
I didn't even know that. So that you just gave me some information. So that's amazing. And whoever's listening, she just gave you a gem. Like that's just the cost segregation and just the tax benefits in that is amazing, because you're never gonna, I've heard it before, but most people aren't going to tell you that. So that is really, really good advice. And I'm not surprised that the person that knows about it is in New Jersey, because New Jersey is pretty much the worst tax state in the country at this point. So I understand why that person may be studying this. But yeah, I mean, I love your strategy. I like the idea that you're getting back into Airbnb. And I bought a cabin in a mountainous area recently. Same thing. It's not a very densely populated Airbnb area. It was a mountain. It's a log cabin. People are using it in the summer because it's by a lake, and they're going to use it in the winter because it's by a ski mountain. So it's been one of my better properties for that reason. So I don't know what you feel about this, but a lot of my strategy, and I'm pretty transparent about it too, is based around, I'm trying to find areas that are experiential, that people are going to go, like for Airbnb. Like that's my whole concept. Like if I would move here, or if I would want to come here to experience what's going on in the immediate area, then this is a place that I think is a good Airbnb place. And that's what I've looked for throughout the country, and I'm continuing to look for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think the mountain, when you're saying Smoky Mountain, is like, that's that idea, right? It's an experience. It's an experience space people want to go to.
Right. And I think it's part of being a lifelong learner, right? So the Nashville Airbnb, it just happened to be where I was living. I staggered into it. And I was very fortunate and profited from it. But now the whole world knows what it is. And so I decided I'm going to jump in a pool with people who are a whole lot smarter. I'm going to start looking at markets where there's not going to be any regulation that I really have to worry about in any sense of the word. And I'm going to learn from them. So mountain cabin is a really good point. There are very affordable houses up in the mountains that you can buy that look like a normal house. People don't want to go to a normal, they want to go to a log cabin. They want to have bears and deer heads and all the things. And that's important. So you can buy this house, and I've seen people do it. Beautiful home, gorgeous, but it's not in the right place. They're coming from New Jersey. They're coming from Michigan and from Dallas, and they don't see mountains. They want to be in the mountains and they want to buy a flannel sweater and finally wear it.
They want the experience. Yeah. And I think that, a couple of things. I think habits have changed for this foreseeable future because of COVID. I think that people started traveling within the country and they liked it and they found places they're going to go back to. And I think that changed things. And also work from home became a thing. And I think Tennessee continued to be a good place because of the tax benefits of living there, obviously. And I think that you're still in a good market, even though it's probably been flooded a little bit, still a good market. But I think I had to adjust my way of thinking, and it seems like you have also, that things are different and it's ever changing. And I think if you don't pivot in real estate, and this was supposed to be a real estate podcast, but we're talking about it. So if you don't pivot in real estate, I think that you'll get left behind. I mean, are you constantly trying to stay ahead of it and look for trends and what's next to kind of get there?
Oh yeah. I mean, this whole new realm is literally in the last 10 to 14 days. And my husband's head is like whipping around so fast because he never knows, what's going to come next. But I will say that everything that we have done has been usually a result of me learning something new and saying, let's go there, let's try that. So, I mean, it's the Disruptors Network, and Airbnb disrupted everything, right? Uber disrupted everything. And I love it. I love anything that allows you to control your own destiny. I think that when I look at an asset too, right? So if I look at this cabin and these pieces of land, number one, can one piece of property kind of support the whole decision? Hopefully, yes. In my estimation, yes. Could I sell it? Yes, of course. But can I use that asset then? Cost segregation, tax write-off. Can I use it? Are there different ways for me? Can I refinance it? Can I pull a HELOC? There's all kinds of things that real estate allows you to do that other things just will never let you do. So everything has to have a job. That's what I say about anything we buy. Like even a piece of furniture, I'm like, it has to have a job. Like so I build an apartment over my garage. I like to use things and have things generating, if not income, then at least adding value in some way, shape, or form. I made another investment I'll tell you about. It's not really related, but it's a company called Third Home. And it's a luxury home exchange company. And I found out about it. And it's like these incredible houses that you don't see on Airbnb. I mean, these are multi-million-dollar, whatever. I mean, you can put, but these are folks who have these homes and don't really care about making the money, but they want to travel the world. So they join an exchange. It's not a timeshare or anything like that.
Okay.
In order to get into it, you need to have like this amazing, beautiful home.
Got it.
And I don't have one of those, but I have a background in sales. So I learned about the company and I did some research and I called the CEO and I met with him over the phone and he told me the concept and they were selling shares. And I said, okay, I'm going to buy them. And I told my husband about it and he was like, but you just finished saying that everything has to be on the payroll. Like everything has to it's not going to earn us any money. And I said, but this is going to give us a lifestyle that we can't accomplish. And even if I could, like, I wouldn't do it myself, Yeah. So we made the investment and I did that with some money from an old 401k. And the point in telling you that story is it has changed our lives. It's changed our adult children's lives. I'm leading a mastermind. I go into these unbelievably exotic places. But the reason I'm telling you that is that you can look for opportunities anywhere. And that's like this opportunity right now with the short-term rental. I had closed my mind to it. I had kept my mind shut because I had kind of a bad experience with it here in Nashville. And then I thought, oh, there's a different way to do it. You can repackage that and have it work for you. So I would just say that, just kind of always looking and always looking for something that serves a purpose or pays a bill.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving really good advice to people. I like to talk to somebody like you who's had some life experience a lot of the time because I think that's where the real substance comes. Going through things like you went through and essentially recreating yourself into this person who had all these massive experiences. And, I think it's important that you speak and it's important that you tell your honest story, especially you, because there's so many people who are going through it that don't think they can. And I think you're proof of anything. And I tell people all the time, you're a proof in the pudding is that you may be just starting today and you could be ahead of where I am now 5 years from now if you just start. You know what I mean? Like just start. You never know how good you're going to be at something. So I want to commend you, first of all, that you've done this, because I feel like it's a story that needs to be told, first of all, and it's amazing that you've been able to get over that obstacle. Yeah, it really is. It's a great story. You never knew. When I started doing research for these interviews, I never knew where to go. When I went to your story, I was like, oh, wow, this is really, like, this isn't easy. You did something really, really hard.
Thank you. And they say what doesn't kill you makes us stronger. I'm like, I'm over it. Okay. I've had, like, God must think I'm a badass. I've had enough already. But, I'm ready to coast. But at the same time, I find it fun. And I think it keeps you young. I think the more you surround yourself with people who are doing things that are interesting, but then take care of yourself first. Like, I don't know anything about Bitcoin, so I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I just have to do what makes me comfortable because of the money culture, because of how I feel. And I want to, that's my definition of wealth, actually, is just having time to do what I want and options to, if anything happens, like if my basement floods or another tornado hits Nashville, it's not the end of my life,
Yeah. I do find this. So I've been in mortgages since 2001. So I went through the crisis and I lost everything. And I was buying real estate when I was 21 and 22 years old, and I lost it and I had to start over again. But I find that I'm very, very debt adverse at this point. Like, I don't really like taking on a lot of debt, and I have mortgages because I need them to. But besides that, I find that I probably don't get my money to go as far as it should go sometimes because I'm not willing to take on debt to get there. Do you find yourself to be that way because of everything you went through, or do you feel like you've learned how to manage it again?
I've definitely am not that way. I don't carry a lot of debt. However, like I don't have a car payment, but I don't care about like cars and clothes and things like that. But I do carry debt. I mean, there's good debt, there's bad debt. And being in the mortgage business, you certainly know that you can carry a debt, but it serves you, right? And so, and in fact, if you have no debt, you kind of become this like weird creature out here if you want to finance something, unless you can buy everything in cash. And believe me, because I've just gone through the mortgage process in Idaho and I'm going through it again here in Tennessee. So I think it's management of that debt, but it's interesting you say that because I had a conversation, and this happens often. I recorded an episode recently where I said, I don't care what Dave Ramsey says. Paying off your mortgage is not always the best way to go. Yeah. There's so many people who have gotten a divorce and especially women, they're middle-aged and they're saying, where do I start over again? I got the house. And I'm like, how about we start with the house?
Yeah, like, you have money there. Yeah.
Wait a minute. You have a house in Austin, Texas, and you have no mortgage? Are you kidding me? And that fear of debt. And I talked to someone the other day who said the same thing. Like, she's so wired against debt because she had a really scary experience and dug herself out of it. But you got to look at it with fresh eyes and then take calculated risks.
That's awesome advice. Yeah, look at it with fresh eyes. You're 100% right, because your situation now isn't your situation from then. I think a lot of people are waiting for this massive event to happen and the real estate market to crash again. And I don't think it's as far as real estate goes. I'm fairly confident that it's not coming. At least nowhere near the fashion it came last time. But I think people are always looking for that event to happen, and they want to have stockpiles of cash just in case it happens, and it may not be coming. Where are you looking next? I know you mentioned a couple investments now, and if people always come to me and say, and I think they're always looking for the secret. It's like, what is your strategy? Like, what's the secret? How you buy houses? And I try to explain I had a conversation with somebody today. There is no secret. I look at every single situation as it is, and I try to figure out what the best way to make money around it is. And if there's not, then I'm always willing to walk away. I mean, what do you tell people that come to you for advice as far on any investments? Doesn't have to be real estate, as far as what they should be focusing on.
Right. Everybody I say first you got to figure out how you feel about it. So every guest on my show, I say, what was your money culture growing up? Because it really affects you. And then what are your beliefs about money? So figure that out, because I know what mine is, and it's really helped me to understand myself and how I move. And then tactically though, go where you're treated best, right? So go to states that are investor friendly and have good tax laws that benefit you. Do a little bit of research. Tennessee, Florida, Nevada, I can't name them all, New Hampshire, no state income tax, and look at how that could benefit you. And don't just look Well, do both things. Like, don't just look in your backyard, and look in your backyard. Like, you could have, again, like you could have a 401k to borrow against, you could have access to equity that you're not using, et cetera. But I think the best advice for me, what I tell people is you got to pick a number that doesn't make you stay up at night. You don't take, people are so afraid. They'll say, I have $500,000 in my 401k and I'm terrified to do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. Well, then just take 25,000. Take 25,000 and put it into something. See how it goes. And maybe you'll kick yourself. You didn't put in 300,000. Move on. It's a muscle. You got to start using that muscle every day. The thinking about it and the opening your mind to it, and taking action. I know you say this every day. It is for me, once I put my foot on the ground in that first house, it was only 4 years to $1.4 million of income producing assets. And that was not easy and not fun. I must have moved 8 times. Not sexy. You don't want to put that on your Match.com profile. But, I just was determined, and I didn't care about what it looked like, what it may have looked like to others. So I think it starts with knowing who you are.
Yeah. I mean, and you did some things I know during your process, and I use you as an example today, actually, because I'm trying to, I have a bunch of younger people in the office that I sit at every single day. And I made a commitment to them that I'm going to help them all buy houses in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
And so we started to sit down and have meetings about it. And, one of the people I met with today, she's very young. She's 22. And I said, I just listened to interviews. At Phylon, actually, she's the one who booked you on the show.
Okay,
and
great.
I spoke to her and I said, I just listened to Jennifer's podcast today, and she was talking about how when she went to go buy a house, that she was willing to make sacrifices, and she stopped getting her hair cut certain places, and she stopped going out for drinks. She had made people come to her house, and like she made. So I said, well, my question to you is, what are you willing to sacrifice to do it? And I think that you've probably sacrificed over and over again, but it sounds like you've actually made it into your habits at this point now, where you don't need a lot, right? Like, and it sounds like you made yourself financial responsible almost by your sacrifices.
Yeah. I just think it's getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So it was a sacrifice, the year of radical saving that I did that was pretty crazy at the time. And I don't have to do that. But what I do that is like that is hop in the car, go to a market where I don't know anybody, find a real estate agent, follow them around, bury your head deep into whatever it is that you're trying to figure out, and try to really understand anything that you're doing. But I do think that it's shocking to me. And I did know this about that you work with a lot of young folks, and I am around a lot of young people too. I really enjoy them, but it's so different from when, like, number one, they're so much better looking than we were in the 80s, like the 70s and 80s. I'm like, holy cow. But there's all this pressure we didn't have, right? The whole Instagram thing. So there's in their 20s, there's Botox and $300 hairdos and lash extensions and nails and all these things. And I'm not saying you have to get rid of it. I'm saying figure out what your money culture is, because that's the intersection between identity and security. So if your money culture is about identity, that means that you have to drive a really nice car and carry an expensive purse and have perfect hair. And that's going to intersect with your security at some point. Like, are you willing to sacrifice your financial security for these things that mean nothing? Right. But that's hard to explain to somebody, especially if they've been raised in it. And I think that we've done a disservice to many folks that are in their 20s by somehow making that normal, Yeah,
making that the big thing. I think you're right. I try to tell them all the time, you need to practice the habit of just practicing on yourself and not what you perceive the competition to be. Forget about what you see on social media, because nobody's telling the honest story most of the time. It's not transparent. They're just showing you what they want to show you. And so just forget about it. If you look at the best companies in the world, Amazon being one of them, their strategy is always that, what are we doing every single day, not what the competition's doing every single day. So I think you have to look at your life like that. Like, control what you can control and practice practice you're working on yourself every single day but you're right. It's hard. It's a society where money is highlighted more than it's ever been ever. And it makes it very, very difficult. So it's confusing. I could, for sure. And I see that in them. And I'm like you, I love being around them because it keeps me energized, and it keeps me kind of plugged in, and it keeps me wanting to strive to be better. But I also see some holes in the stuff, where they're better than us in so many ways. In some ways they're not. And I think those are the ways that make people like me and you relevant forever. As long as we keep evolving, right? Like we can help them. And that's kind of what my goal has become. But so tell everybody, I know you have the podcast. Are you working on anything else that you want to tell people about? And where's the best place to hear you and get in touch with you? Like, what's going on in your world?
Yeah, I have the podcast, Micro Empires. My website is micro-empires. Would love for folks to visit me there. And I have a Facebook community. I do a lot there of just really kind of breaking things down, the nitty gritty, because I find that that's really what people need. I'm writing a course at the moment. I'm leading some masterminds around multifamily. There'll be very small groups of women, and I won't be the multifamily expert. I will bring in the expert. But we'll do them in some really cool places. So I'd love people to do that. I'm really, the opportunity to speak is really what I'm looking for. I'm part of a couple of mastermind groups, women and other groups. I'm sure that you are too. You kind of have to stay around people who are floating so you can keep things going. And it's interesting because they all own individual businesses. They're entrepreneurs. And at some point I said, I don't really know that I fit here. And, I said, I don't have a storefront, and I don't, I'm not necessarily selling something. I said, I'm building my own wealth, and I'm really just trying to teach people how to do that along the way. The podcast, it was never expected like, oh, I'm going to be a famous podcaster and make lots of money. And anybody who's thinking that, just shut that door right now. But I think more than anything, so what I learned from my fellow business owners in the mastermind was, but that is a business. And so I look at my wealth building now as a business. I think the only difference, and I always have, I just didn't put it like that. The only difference is I'm sharing it as I'm going along. So I would love, I'd love to see, I get a lot of feedback. It's incredible. You've probably had this experience, what people share with me. I'm shocked at how and honored and that they will share the most intimate things with me. But this stuff is hard. And, you kind of grow up like, for some reason, we're all supposed to know about money and how to do it when we never had any training in it whatsoever, let alone all the emotions that come behind it, that everything that it's tied into. So I know that's a long answer, but
it's a good answer though. It's very good. It's very good. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I love your story. I really do, and I'm going to be curious to hear where it goes from here, because I'm sure you're building something new that's going to be great, and I'd like to hear the next chapter once you have it finished. And where can people get in touch with you?
Probably the best place is Facebook, Micro Empires, and join the Micro Empires community, or the website, which is micro-empires.com.
And I implore anybody, especially women who are looking for other women to network with, that you gave out some really, really good advice today that I took stuff from, and I'm in the business for 20 years. So for anybody who's looking to start investing in real estate or anything like that, I think that you would be a great source of information. So thank you again for all you do, and thank you for coming on. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been great.
You're welcome, Jennifer.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jennifer Grimson, and she helped you redefine what a new path for you to financial freedom can actually be. And I hope you guys are excited for next week, because we have Kent Ritter, who's actually the CEO of Hudson Investing, that he teaches you how to, one, diversify your real estate portfolio, but the best, to be able to scale it. So I hope you guys can tune in, because you don't want to miss it. See you guys next week.